Today, we're unpacking a massive change in the global economy, a complete rewiring of how things get from, well, there to here. The term you need to know is friendshoring, and trust me, it's changing just about everything. I want you to think back a bit, just over the last couple of years. Remember going to the store for something, I don't know, totally basic? Car parts, a new phone, maybe even just toilet paper? And the shelf was just empty. Yeah. You probably figured, it's just a temporary glitch, right?
Well, here's the thing. It wasn't just a glitch, not even close. What you were seeing was actually a symptom of something way bigger. It was the sound of a 30-year-old system, the entire global system of trade, starting to crack. A system that was built for decades on just one single idea: make things as cheap as humanly possible.
So the big question is, how on earth did we get here? Well, it wasn't one single thing. It was a series of massive shocks that hit the global system, bam, one after another, forcing a total rethink of how the world does business.
You can really think of it like a 1-2-3 punch to the global economy. First, you had the US-China trade war, which kind of showed everyone that, hey, politics can suddenly just stomp all over business logic. Then, boom, the pandemic hits, and it just rips the curtain back on how incredibly fragile our super efficient, just-in-time delivery systems actually were. And then, as if that wasn't enough, Russia's invasion of Ukraine showed the whole world how a country's reliance on another for something like energy could literally be turned into a weapon.
Okay, so out of all this chaos, a new idea started to bubble up. It's an idea captured in a single term that you're going to start hearing a lot more about: friendshoring. But what does that even mean? What is it exactly?
Well, at its core, the concept is actually pretty simple. The big idea is to, maybe stop making your most critical stuff in countries you could potentially end up in a conflict with. Instead, you shift your manufacturing, your sourcing, to nations you see as allies, friends, if you will, countries that share similar values, similar political systems. It's really a shift, prioritizing trust over the absolute lowest cost. And this isn't some fringe idea. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who's a major champion of this, put it this way: the goal isn't to pull up the drawbridge and stop trading altogether. Nope. The point is to trade more securely. It's about lowering the risk that some big geopolitical crisis could suddenly just sever our access to the things we absolutely need. And this right here, this is the absolute core of the shift in thinking. For, 30 years, the number one question for any business was simple: where can we make this for the absolute lowest cost? That's offshoring. But now the question has changed. Now it's, where can we make this most securely, with partners we know we can actually count on when things get tough? So the main driver, it's not just economic efficiency anymore, it's political trust.
Now, obviously, an idea this huge, this world-changing, doesn't just happen without some major pushback and some really serious questions. So let's get into the reality check. What happens when this nice, clean theory crashes into the messy, real world? Well, for starters, critics are lining up. The head of the World Trade Organization, for instance, is raising some major red flags. The big fear is that friendshoring is just a pretty new name for a very old idea: protectionism, that it's really just a way for powerful countries to play favorites, help out their friends, and lock out their competitors, potentially tearing up decades of work on global cooperation. I mean, think about the potential endgame here. If you take this to its logical extreme, you could literally end up with a world split in two. You'd have one block of democracies trading mostly with each other, and another block of authoritarian regimes doing the same. You'd get these totally separate, disconnected supply chains. And that could leave a lot of developing nations completely out in the cold, while also gutting the very global institutions like the WTO that were built to stop this kind of thing from happening. Okay, so you've got the huge geopolitical risks. But beyond all that, there's a very practical, very expensive reality we need to talk about: the actual cost of moving the world's factories. And folks, the numbers, they're just staggering. Get ready for this number: $4.6 trillion. Let that sink in. That's the estimated value of all the global exports that might have to be moved from one country to another as part of this great rewiring. The scale is it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. We're not talking about moving one or two factories here. We are talking about fundamentally reconfiguring a massive piece of the entire global economy.
And the hurdles to actually doing this, they're enormous. First, there's that staggering financial investment we just talked about. This isn't something that happens overnight. We're talking years, maybe even decades. Plus, let's be realistic. You can't just snap your fingers and suddenly not need a manufacturing giant like China for critical components and raw materials. And here's another problem. What happens when every company in the US and Europe decides, hey, Mexico and Vietnam are our new best friends? Well, you don't solve the problem, you just create brand new traffic jams and bottlenecks in new places. So this challenge is so huge, so complex, that it's actually forcing a radical change, a whole new deal, really, in the relationship between governments and big business. Think about how things used to be. For decades, the mantra from the business world was pretty simple. Government, get out of the way. Any kind of regulation of their supply chains was seen as nothing but red tape, something that just added costs and slowed things down. But now, that has done a complete 180. It has totally flipped. Suddenly, businesses are facing these massive geopolitical risks that they just can't handle on their own. So what are they doing? They're actually turning to the government, asking for help, for clear rules, and even for financial support to help them build these new, more secure supply chains. And there's a new word for this new model: orchestration. You can think of it as a kind of public-private partnership on steroids. It's where the government and what are called lead firms, the huge players, your big tech companies, your pharmaceutical giants, they start working together hand in hand. Their job is to map out and secure the supply chains for the really important stuff. The things a country decides it absolutely cannot afford to run out of, like advanced computer chips or essential medicines. All right, I know this has all been very big picture, very geopolitical, so let's bring it all the way back down to earth. What does this massive global shift actually mean for you, for the stuff you see on the shelf, the things you buy every day, and yeah, the price you pay for them? When you boil it all down, it comes to a really fundamental trade-off. On one hand, moving factories and rebuilding supply chains in friendly countries, which are often more expensive countries, well, that's almost certainly going to mean higher prices for some of the stuff we buy. But here's the other side of the coin, what we might gain: reliability. The hope is that by paying a little more, we get a lot more security. So the next time a global crisis hits, the shelves won't be bare. And that right there is the billion or maybe trillion-dollar question at the heart of all this. It's a choice between the super low prices and incredible efficiency we've all gotten so used to, and a new kind of resilience that recent years have shown us we desperately need. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Are you willing to pay more for a more secure world?